He was going to attend. Is he? I see Tom Fisher. I don't see.
There's no one in the room.
You got his phone? Can you just text him? Yeah, he's not unless he is Tom Fisher, which I don't. I think that would be of the Fisher family. So. Yeah. Oh, maybe he's in Morocco furiously trying to get his internet working or something.
Is that where he is?
I think he's in Morocco, yeah. Yeah, at Airbnb Morocco. We got 6, so I call to order the meeting of the Verona Common Council for Monday, November 11th, 2024 at 7:01 p.m. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the roll.
Alderperson Helmke. Here. Alderperson Hoaxed.
Present.
Alderperson Kaiser McHenry.
Here.
Alderperson Lytle.
Here.
Alderperson Posey.
Here.
Alderperson Tucker Long.
Here.
And I believe Alderperson Braithwaite will be joining us on Zoom shortly, and Alderperson Harrison is absent and excused.
We have 6 people, which is just enough for quorum, so we can proceed. We'll proceed on to item 4, which is public comment. If any members of the public wish to speak, now would be the time to do so. We used to have a lectern. It broke into pieces. Happily, nobody was injured by it. I was starting to wonder a little bit. But if you'd like, you can come up right up to that table and comment. Your call. It's probably easier with the mic, I guess.
Hi, I'm Lee Jordan, Executive Director of the Verona Area Chamber of Commerce, and also the Chamber is the tourism entity for the City of Verona, and I'm here to speak in support of the Event Center and the shared parking agreements that are being worked out for that facility. We think that this is an awesome asset for Verona and will bring a lot of very different people into the community, and lots of different events will be able to be held here. And we believe that the parking agreements will be wonderful and will work well. And if for some reason in the future things change, we are ready and willing to work with other local businesses here in town to try to foster additional agreements for shared parking. So I'm just here in support of the Event Center and the parking. Thanks.
Thank you. We're still in public comment, so if any members of the public wish to speak, now would be the time to do so.
I'm supposed to sign in, and I didn't do it yet. My name is Layla Sonier. I'm a 35-year resident of the City of Verona, a member of Sustain Verona, and I also serve on the Sustainability Task Force for the Verona Common Council. I'm very excited to see the possibilities ahead for the city in terms of equipping buildings with solar panels, purchase of an electric vehicle, and charging station, along with other environmentally conscious plans to add to those that have already been instituted. All of these efforts will bring our city up to speed with other communities in Dane County and serve as an example for business leaders and Verona citizens alike. During these difficult times, the phrase, think globally, act locally, takes on new meaning. I wait excitedly for the passage of the 2025 budget, and thank you all in advance for your forward thinking on behalf of all of us.
Thank you. We are still in public comment, so if anyone else wishes to comment, now would be the time to do so. Yeah, is the light on? Mr. Lamers, could you talk to Mara and see if she can turn the PA up?
So with this, you have to put your mouth right in. Sorry, I didn't sign it.
Hello, my name's Charlie Egan. I'm here representing the Fairfield Inn Suites and the Holiday Inn Express in Verona. I'm a hotelier. I've got many years in the hotel business. I'm a former chairman of the Wisconsin State Lodging Association, president of the Greater Madison Lodging Association, and I've operated these hotels in Verona since 2008. I'm speaking in support of the event center and regarding the parking, and I'm hoping that you will support moving this project forward with flexibility regarding parking. In my experience, having hotels in proximity of the event center will greatly reduce the need for parking at the center site. It's very uncommon to have a required shared parking agreement with a lodging facility because the parking is assumed as part of the arrangement as long as it's within range. We're willing to do this. It's just complicated because we have franchise agreements in place with the brands, and it does make it a little bit complicated because there's operating standards and licensing requirements that we have to abide to as part of our license agreement. That said, I believe that we worked in good faith with the developer to come up with a path forward that will meet everybody's expectations. But this project is very important to Verona, and it's very important to the success of our room tax collections for the city and for the success of our businesses. Since COVID and since the reduction in Epic travel, hotels are struggling in Verona. We still haven't gotten back to the levels of business we had in 2019. It's been 5 years. We need every bit of help we can get, and I'm hoping that you will help this project move forward so we can find some success in many areas as we can. I'm willing to take questions. Well, I mean, it's public comment now, but, or afterwards if you want to reach out to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We are still in public comment.
Reverend Mike Wiegand from Sugar River United Methodist Church. I also speak in favor of the conference center and parking agreements. The folks next door have been great at talking with us, and we are excited to have the event center. We think it will be helpful for us as a church, for people when they have a wedding, or some of the larger events that we want to hold, to have them there, and we are happy to cooperate with that agreement. So part of our denomination is that there are some specific things that we cannot do with deeds, and so putting easements in is not going to be allowed, but we are happy to sign an agreement, and that is something that we are allowed to do to make this happen. So thanks.
We are still in public comment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Cohen, and I've been a resident of Verona for about almost 8 years. I'm here to talk briefly on 2 topics. So first, I'm here to support the funds allocated for solar panels, electric transportation, EV charging, and tree planting. I appreciate that the mayor and the Common Council have prioritized Verona's sustainable future. These investments make our city more resilient to climate change and an attractive place to live, work, learn, and build a business. Thank you for having the vision to see the long-term benefits of these investments for our city, its residents, and the planet, and I look forward to seeing more. Second, unrelated yet still important, I am proud to live in a city that flies a pride flag. I'm proud of the businesses that have flags out year-round, our school district that facilitates GSA meetings for students, and our library that carries books for everyone. I urge the mayor and the common council to consider having a pride flag year-round because pride should be acknowledged 365 days a year, not just in June. Thank you.
Thank you. We are still in public comment.
Hello, hello. My name is Jeff Johnson. I've been a resident of Verona for 36 years. I'm also part of the Sustain Verona Group and a member of the Verona Sustainable Task Force. And I'm here in strong support of the capital projects for the solar panels, the Park Tree Program, and the electric vehicle and charger. I mean, it's going to be great if you're concerned about climate change, and if you happen to be a dollar and cents person. Last time I checked, solar panels have a payback period of about 10 years. So you spend money today, payback of 10 years, they last 25, 30 years. It seems to make good common sense from a dollar and cent perspective. Similarly, strong support for the assistant city administrator. It's my understanding that this position will also spend some time focused on climate change, focused on sustainability. When we talked to neighboring communities about their sustainability program, they said it was important to have people kind of devoted, spending time on this to have the most impact. And in many cases, they would say the money you spent, you got back, 2 times fold through grants, that type of thing. And so you have to sometimes spend some money on the front end to get greater returns, current in the future. So for all these reasons, we're strongly in support of the sustainability efforts, not only for the city of Verona, but what the city of Verona does will probably go over into the residents, and they might be more apt to do residential solar when they see what's going on in the city. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're still in public comment.
Good evening, council members. I'm Connor Nett with Forward Development Group, here to share public comment on the Sugar Creek Commons shared parking strategy and agreements. Charlie and Pastor Mark already shared their feedback as the adjacent landowners that are helping to provide parking. I think they help provide a lot of legitimacy to our shared parking plan. The staff report, I'd just like to comment on one item. It correctly depicted a 246 stall deficit as by ordinance. To address this deficit, I wanted to draw attention to the shared parking study that was completed for Sugar Creek Commons. That parking strategy looked at trip demand generation and the overlap between parking usage. So parking patterns overlap where a stall used by an office user during the day in the evening could be used by a restaurant user or a resident at night. So making sure that we're doubling our parking there where we're not having stalls sit vacant too long. Based on this overlap on a day-to-day basis, we could see a 105 stall surplus of parking on most days. On days when we have large events, such as a 200-person conference, we could have a 113 stall deficit. Between the church and the hotel, that's where our shared parking strategy works together. And those 3 sites between the 2 hotels and church could provide an additional 237 stalls. We are trying to find a balance between day-to-day needs of the parking with the peak parking demands when large events do occur. With the parking strategy that we have, the operator and the design that we have to date, we feel we're leveraging the local parking supply to create a walkable urban development while also balancing the needs of the parking that we will need. I'm available if we have any comments during the agenda item. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. We are still in public comment. If anyone else wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so.
Hi, I'm Allison Plummer, Tourism Coordinator at the Chamber of Commerce, and I am here in support of the agenda item regarding the Destination Madison Agreement. So again, if there's any questions on the revised agreement, I can answer those during that agenda item. And then I also wanted to echo support for the event center and the demand that is there that we would be able to meet if we had a facility of that nature, and our willingness to support the management who would be running the event center and finding additional parking should that be necessary. But it seems like they have a great plan, so that's it.
We are still in public comment. If any other members of the public wish to speak, now would be the time to do so. Not seeing anyone approaching our table, so we'll move on to item 5, which is approval of the minutes from the October 28th, 2024 Common Council meeting. Corrections or motions to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Posey. Last chance for corrections. Seeing no corrections, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the October 28th, 2024 Common Council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? And the minutes are approved. We'll move on to item 6, which is mayor's business. First up, we have an update on the Fitron EMS from Chief Patrick Anderson. Chief Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alders, for inviting me or allowing me to come chat with you this evening. For those of you who've read the intergovernmental agreement before bedtime, to help you fall asleep in the evenings, part of that intergovernmental agreement is that every October we actually have an annual meeting. Since the last 40-some years, where all the municipalities get together, it's become kind of an additional challenge to the busy road that you already have and those duties you already have. One of the things we have discussed is actually doing a little bit more personal contact with you and having me come talk to you, each one of the councils with the cities and the township as well. So I'm going to try to give you that abbreviated version of what I talked about at the annual meeting last month with the rest of the municipalities. I think Mara's going to throw that presentation up there. There we go. And I will email this as well to Holly so she can share that with you. I know you have a busy agenda tonight, so I'll keep it pretty focused and allow you to ask any questions, please, at any time. So we try to do about every 2 years, do a picture of our staff. This happened to be kind of a low turnout day, but this is there's our staff. That's in front of Fitchburg Station number 2 at Marketplace. So kind of a Fitrona by the numbers, update this every year. So we serve the city of Verona, city of Fitchburg and Verona Township. Latest numbers, 48,714 people, so a little bit up from last year. If we take the budget for Fitrona, it's a best guess based on what we generate for run revenue for the next year. The remainder of that funding source for Fitrona then is divided by the population, that 48,000 people. So it's about $44.64 for every resident of the district to operate Fitrona. The county does a county-wide survey every year of EMS agencies. They get about a 50% return rate on that. But $44.64 is about smack dab in the middle of all the rest of the EMS agencies in Dane County. There's still a handful of them out there that are still volunteer, and it is a 0% fully funded by pancake breakfasts and whatever else they do. And then some of those smaller communities that they're just paying significant amounts to get people in to keep ambulances in service. So we're doing pretty good right in the middle of the pack. All those 3 municipalities is about 71 square miles we have. We operate 3 ambulances 24/7. Those are paramedic level ambulances. We do own 5 ambulances. We rotate them into stock when we do routine maintenance or when we upstaff for special events. We have 2 support vehicles, 2 SUVs. One is here in Verona, the other one's up in the other corner of Fitchburg. Using those primarily for, I would say it's very familiar with the 9 miles between here and the South Seine Road, as I call the FedEx part of my day, where I run supplies back and forth and move things around. But we do also respond to calls with those. In addition to that, a handful of years ago, we had a support trailer donated by the county. We repurposed a free trailer from the county. We use that now for structure fires, large events, some of our special events as well, as opposed to having chairs and water and food and shelter and everything for those large events that we help support. They are now in one place in a trailer we hook up and take with us. And then we used an EPIC grant about 2 years ago to purchase an electric UTV that helps us out at the high school during cross-country events and some of our other special events. So that's our fleet. As far as our people go, right, the most important part of what we have, 21 full-time paramedics. Those are the ones who are running those ambulances every day. 2 administrative staff, that's myself and my deputy chief. We do have a part-time office manager, Michelle, who I will continue to throw kudos out all of the time. She works about 16 hours a week and is a lifesaver for all of us to help do just the administrative things we need to do. Any one time, I get about 15 to 17 part-timers who cover all of those open shifts. I have 3, we call them LTEs, limited term. It's very equivalent to a part-time position. There's just some, we are a union shop, and there's some union connotations to that part-time position, so we can't call them part-timers. We call them LTEs. But we do have a couple of EMTs who actually come help us out with special events as well. We do have 2 interns. They are 2-year interns with us. We get them particularly targeted to us through the Next Generation Academy. They're high school students who take first responder fire classes in high school and then come to us and interview. We keep them for 2 years as they complete their paramedic associate degree. Kind of a great thing I've shared with that. This will be our 3rd year starting that in that budget process. There are very few, actually, I know of no other EMS only or paramedic only internships. Lots of fire internships, but this is a great program that focuses on those students who don't want to be firefighters but are interested in a career in EMS. So we have started our 3rd one this year, and then I always like to share we have 1 volunteer paramedic who's been with us just about 35 years. Every Sunday he picks up from about noon to 4 and rides as a 3rd, and about every 3 years still tells me this will be his last year, and he re-signs up. So that's Tom Bates with us, and he's still around and helping us out. That is the map of our district. The best I can get it off of Google Maps, where you see those stars. That's the locations of where our stations are. You can see where we are in Verona, and then we look at Marketplace and South Seine Road up in that upper right-hand corner. Every month, I provide an EMS Chiefs report to the Commission. We meet the 2nd Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock at Fitchburg City Hall. It is an open meeting. It is streamed on Fitchburg Fact TV. You're always welcome to watch there or join us any month up in Fitchburg. But this is the information I present to them, and then I actually do email this to the mayor and city administrators the day after that meeting. Well, I try to remember the day after. But this is compared to about the last 2 years, looking where we're at. So you can see there's been a pretty significant increase over the last couple of years. If I go last 40 some years of FitchRona, we plan about a 3% increase in calls every year. In reality, it's about a 5% increase every year. And this year we're on target for about 6.2% over last year. So this year, looking at going to top over 5,000 calls for the first time in our history. A number I know you're very familiar with is how this breaks down by municipality. So they're just looking at 1 month, the municipalities compared with each other, and then year to date. So 60% of our calls do occur up in the city of Fitchburg. It's 25% down here, and then kind of a spattering of about 3% in the town of Verona, and then other municipalities there that total about 4%. That's providing help to other municipalities when they're out of resources. I don't report, it's not in this report, but we do actually receive mutual aid, is what that's called. We do receive help from municipalities every once in a while as well. Just a 1 month snapshot, that's what October looks like. If you're a pie chart first person versus a graph person versus the different ways we like to look at data. Always like to share this as well. This is a number I report every month to our commission. This is a number I look at. We do have some benchmarks that we like to meet. That median time is that notified to en route. So right, and this is 1.42 seconds. So it's not. It's 90 seconds. It's not 1.42 minutes. That always gets a little bit confusing, but essentially what it is, that median time is we are out the door within 90 seconds. right, for that median time, and then that 90th percentile is less than 3 minutes. That's the taking into consideration that this is every call, regardless of the time of day. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, right, it does take them a little bit longer to get up, get their boots on, get down to the door, open the door, hit the button, and head out. But things we like to look at, right, they're getting out the door most of the time within 90 seconds. As you can see, the median time for us to respond to any of our calls in our district is still less than 5 minutes, which is ideal. There is a national standard that there should be some sort of EMS provider to a patient's side in less than 10 minutes under that 90th percentile. You can see we're at that 9.12. It does bump up every once in a while, but we are hovering right where we should be based on that national standard. Putting that all together is those numbers there. As you can see, when we sit on scene, that is a number I watch, our medical directors watch. 15 minutes is kind of that golden spot where we want to be, no less than 15 minutes on scene. Reason being is that number afterwards, our average transport time is about 15 minutes. So getting on scene, getting that patient stabilized and getting transported to the hospital. And then that last one is the one I look at, right, to see how long it takes them to turn that patient care over, clean up that cot, grab their juice, and get back into service. There's two maps here. I've got another focus one on Verona. This is the one to me that's probably the most impactful to share with you. As we looked at the location of those stations in Verona and Fitchburg, this is a heat map for the last 12 months. So you can see where our calls are. I always like to try to avoid to list facilities that happen to be in those big red dots, but you can kind of see that northeast, if you look down in the Verona, right, that left-hand side there, that's a lot of senior housing, elderly housing, assisted living up there in that big red dot. And then on the right-hand side there up in Fitchburg, that is primarily that Fish Hatchery Road corridor and that Chapel Valley Road area. Up way in that right-hand corner is that new area of the old, the old town of Madison or New Fitchburg for us. So that is where the majority of our calls are. Again, the rest of the colors on there is those spatterings of where we're going. This is very much a focus of what Verona looks like, right? Just as we hit, where do most of our calls occur? Right there in that upper part there, that North Edge Trail, Enterprise Drive area. And then since we've zoomed in a little lower to the left, little center there, that big yellow spot is just down here on Jefferson. So these are where we're getting our calls. Other things I just report, it's really just a data sharing with you, right? Calls by day of the week, it doesn't really matter, right? The height is on Monday where no one wants to go back to work. That's part of that hour of the day. Biggest one I like to show the hour of the day that we look at. There's a median there, and then based on that month, then I highlight that one, highlight that little block there. This is what I look at as we move forward, as I'll talk about towards the end here of where is Fitrona going and what are our needs in the future, and it's that spot right there. That is our highest call volume right there. I don't believe I put it in this slide. Hopefully you get that chief's report passed on to you, but there's at least, I believe we're up to 35 times this year where we were out of ambulances, not just mutual aid coming in to help us out, but we were out of ambulances. So 35 times this year, some other community had to come in and help us out. The majority of those, yes, do occur in Fitchburg, but I would still say there is a very large amount that do occur in Verona. So as we look at additional staffing, right, if I look at that chart, I don't know that I necessarily need another ambulance at 3 o'clock in the morning. I need another one at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So as we can kind of play with some creative staffing or what are some different options for growth in the future, that's that target area that we're looking at. Other facts for you, right? I do this every month. This is just dispatch reasons. This isn't necessarily the reason that we were ultimately called for, because we don't know till we get there. So everything we do is based off of what we are called for. Falls and sick person are the top two. They just flip back and forth every other month. Falls is a big focus on us. I shouldn't say for us. Falls is a statewide focus for EMS. How do we prevent, right? We like to compare ourselves, right? Ultimately, the fire department wants it so that they don't go on any fires. Ultimately, our call, our desire as well would be we don't go on any calls. One of those is falls. So lots of work that we're doing. I don't know that we're making any difference, but we're trying on how do we prevent those falls. Then I always like to divide up by stations. Crews like to see this so they can thump their chest about who's the busiest station. Right, as you can imagine, it's that middle station as well. Biggest reason that middle station number 2 is the one on Marketplace. So that's the one in the middle of Fitchburg. Biggest reason that I would say it's is busiest is because it's the one that goes back and forth between Verona and Fitchburg. Right, so if a second ambulance is needed in Verona, that's the one that's tagged. It's still about, I think we're about 7 minutes away for that ambulance to get down here. So that is largely the busiest ambulance between all of them. Here's the number I shared with you before. So I tracked the number of times that all of our ambulances were out. So in the month of just looking at September 8, there was 20 times where all 3 ambulances were out. That doesn't necessarily mean another call came in. It just means we were out of resources. That number below that, 34, that is the number of times that we did require someone else to come in and help us out. Majority of the time, that's City of Madison. I think 2 times it was actually this year, Belleville actually had to come up because the City of Madison was out of ambulances. As we look into the future, I don't think there's ever going to be a day that every municipality, right, would love to put an ambulance on every corner of every street and be to everybody's house in 5 minutes, right? It's just not fiscally responsible. However, as we be good neighbors with our, we need to take care of our own calls. So we're at 34, we're at 34 this year, and that was through the end of September, getting pretty close to that 42 where we were at last year. Last thing, well, a couple of the things I share with that report I shared with the commission every month. I do share our financials. You can see that's where we're at, right? Lots of data in there. Just shows our operating budget, our assigned funds, which is our FAP funds that we get from the state. We do get an EPIC grant, as well as the labor contract funds. What you see there largely with the CDs is we take and try to put that reserve fund into CDs with the higher returning. Also kind of keeps them a little bit more protected. So we don't go play with that money. And then the WISC fund down there at the bottom, that's our post-retirement healthcare fund. That's part of the contract we have with our employees. When they retire, they have to meet state retirement qualifications, but then their sick balance is actually paid out into a post-retirement healthcare fund. So that is a cost investment account. I forget what WISC stands for, but it's a municipal investment account for us. So that money, this report is shared with our commission every month. So that's the chief's report that I share every month. A couple more slides just to share with you that I talk about at the annual meeting is this, right? What is the vision of Fitrona? What is my goals, or what are my goals? What is the goals of my staff, right? Where are we going? And back to pies and charts. We go back all the way back to 1978 when Fitrona started in September of 1978, right? And we ran 600 calls that year. And you can see this year we're on track for 5,000. So if we take that 2% or that 3 to 5% every year. 2019 was when we added our last full-time ambulance. That was that one up in that upper corner of Fitchburg to take care of that Southdale neighborhood, or New Fitchburg. So as we look forward, I know those who are on the budget committee I've shared this with you the last couple of years, right? I know it's a big cost because staffing another ambulance isn't just one person, right? It's a minimum of 4 to do it in a 12-hour shift. It's a minimum of 7 to do it in a 24-hour shift. So completely get we are a personnel-heavy organization. But again, as we're looking at those calls within the next couple of years, we're going to need to add that 4th ambulance to keep up with where we're at. As I mentioned previously, it's not necessarily a 24/7 truck, right? That would be great, but I do understand the constraints we have to work with. So different options of permanent part-time positions, peak time staffing, different options that are out there, as well as not that far off in the future is that 2030 and 2031. If we continue on to this 3 to 5%, within about the next less than 10 years, we're going to be hitting that 6,000 call volume. So keeping that on that radar, again, is not that far out there. We are constantly talking about different options, right? The answer is not always to put 7 new people in an ambulance in the street. Some of that is actually doing things I'll talk about here, and that's mobile integrated health, that is fall prevention, right? How do we keep people from calling the ambulance? So lots of options there, but putting that on your radar that, right, potentially that's what that future looks like. some of the things I'd like to share that we are doing above and beyond some of our neighbors, and we used some EPIC funds last year to finally get it implemented. This year, it's called Point of Care Ultrasound. There's only a handful of EMS agencies in the state who are doing this. Some limitations on it at this point are put on us by the state of Wisconsin as far as scope of practice, but the potential for this is huge. So we are the only ones in Dane County who use this. The current scope that we're limited to is essentially those patients who are in cardiac arrest, or we call them those near cardiac arrest states. We can put a cardiac monitor on, we can look what's going on electrically, we can feel for pulses, but maybe we don't feel them, maybe their blood pressure is too low, we're not feeling them, so we are kind of limited as to that action that we can take. With point of care ultrasound, we can actually grab that ultrasound, we can actually look and see what's going on at a patient's heart. So that's what our current scope is for us. Again, huge things we can do with this in the future once we get more proficient with it. And then with the EPIC grant we got in 2025 is that we were actually able to, they'll be here any day now, just like everything else we order in the world. They're actually integrated cot scales. So they mount to our current cot scales, and actually they weigh our patients. The reasons this is important for us, largely for our pediatric patients, but for all our patient populations, is much of our patient medication dosing is weight-based. So if I asked any of you now, right, what you would tell me what your weight is, how many would be, right, an ideal weight, or what we wish that weight would be. So we can actually get accurate weights on patients so that we're not overdosing or underdosing patients. This as well also has an integrated, the technology that we put forth is that we can actually put a patient's best guess weight in there. Once that patient gets on that cot and their weight comes through, it actually will do the math for us. We always try to make our lives 2 a.m. proof, right? Woke up in the middle of the night to a very, very sick patient. You got to start thinking straight and doing math at 2 a.m. This is going to help kind of be a safety check for that. So lots of really good things that we've done, and then things what we're looking at doing in the future. Right? As I had mentioned, is the mobile integrated health or community EMS, right? How can we prevent people from going to the hospital? I know one of the things that's been brought up is that CARES team, the mental health team. So lots of different options in there for us. Just how do we do that? How do we do it financially responsibly, responsible, getting the right people in the right places. Other things in there, we can do point of care lab testing, right? As we start throwing, I always like to say, right now, we get these great things in there. I don't want them to become toys. I want them to become tools, right? To make sure that we're using them appropriately. We only have a 15-minute transport time, so right, it doesn't make sense to sit in the side of the road for half an hour when I can be at a hospital in 15 minutes. So very robust QA process we have to make sure we're using them right. Other safety things, oxygen cylinder lifts, respiratory fit testing machines, advanced skills heads, and then always the e-bikes. The bikes we got from, the first, we have a fleet of 4 bikes that we predominantly use out at EPIC for the events out there, though we do use them for some other events that we have here, right, as my staff eyes up those e-bikes so that they don't have to work as hard. This is kind of that wish list that's up on my board of, should we get options in the future to grow and add things to create employee safety, to improve better patient care, what can we do? I know you got lots to talk about tonight, so I tried to keep it as short as I could. I'll entertain any questions, or if anyone needs to reach out afterwards, you can get my contact information.
Any questions for Chief Anderson? Well, as stated, if someone thinks of one later, they can send him an email.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you for being here. I will move on to 6B, and that's basically just an announcement. There is no common council meeting for November 25th, and there's no council meeting for December 23rd. So it's one meeting in November, one meeting in December. If some emergency comes up, we will try to schedule as needed. But that's everything for mayor's business. With that, we move on to item 7, which is announcements from the council. Any announcements from the council? Alder Tuckalong.
I have the monthly anniversary cards ready to go, so stop by after the meeting to sign them.
Thank you. Any other announcements from the council? Seeing no hands, we will move on to item 8, which is the administrator's report. Mr. Olick.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. I just have one thing from the last couple of weeks, and that is, again, to compliment Clerk Holly Licht on the amazing election administration that the administration part of the election that she performed. On Election Day, there was no lights on the nuclear reactor board going off or anything like that. It was a pretty quiet day all around from an election administration standpoint. And the next day, you could hear a pin drop as well. So it's usually a late night and everybody's kind of beat. But overall, her staff and all her poll workers, everybody top to bottom did an amazing job, and we should be really proud about how Verona administers elections. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Aulick? Seeing no questions, we move on to item 9, which is engineer's report. Ms. Fisher.
Thank you. Just a couple updates. Construction is continuing on the Laser Street extension in Liberty Business Park, and the public improvements are continuing in the Arden Glen subdivision. And finally, County Highway PD from Northern Lights Road to Country View Road. All major construction items have been completed, and the road is open to traffic in its final condition. So with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fisher? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to item 10. First up, we have, which is committee reports. First up, we have 10A, which is Finance Committee. Alder Honke.
Yes, thank you. I'm making a motion for payment of the bills in the amount of $1,408,801.61.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Alder Posey. Alder Humke.
Yeah, one of the items is to AECom Engineering for $244,290 for various projects, to Parisi Construction for $174,322 for Eastview Road, and to Scott Construction for $367,051 for pavement surface treatment chip seal roads.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on the motion to pay the bills? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of paying the bills in the amount specified signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? And that motion passes. Alder Humke.
Yes, I make a motion to approve resolution number 24-031.
Sorry, one quick question. We should move on to item 2, which is the public hearing. So we'd want to open the public hearing on that topic.
How do I do that?
You would just move to open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing.
Regarding the 2025 City of Verona budget. Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Alder Posey. All those in favor of opening the public hearing on the budget signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? And we're in the public hearing, and I do want to note that typically we would have the comments on the budget under this item, but I know some people had to comment and leave, and the public comment is open to everyone, and we can't really restrict what people say. So if someone was waiting to comment on the budget, you could do so. Seeing no one approaching the table, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on this topic.
I make a motion to close the public hearing on the 2025 budget.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second? Yeah. Second by Alder Host. All those in favor of closing the public hearing on this topic, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? And the public hearing is closed. Alder Humke.
Move to approve resolution number 24-31, approving the 2025 City of Verona budget. We are recommending an amendment to include the first amendment for $3,000 for staff appreciation.
Okay. So I guess, right, the way that we'll handle this is we'll have the initial motion for the budget, and then we'll discuss amendments.
Okay, so I'll move to approve the resolution 24-31, approving the 2025 City of Verona budget.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Posey. Alder Humke.
Two proposed amendments have been received. The 2025 budget process has been a collaborative effort by staff, alders, and Mayor Diaz to invest in the City of Verona, and staff respectfully request approval of the 2025 budget.
All right. I guess can we discuss the recommended budget amendment from Finance?
Yes. So there is an amendment to, I'm going to find this. There's an amendment requested in the amount of $3,000. And this amendment would increase, it would create a line item for staff appreciation, and it would decrease the contingency fund by the corresponding $3,000. The Finance Committee discussed this, and in coordination with the city administrator, we believe that having this additional funds available, it's a goal of Mitch Weckerly, who is our HR manager, and so we feel like this money will be adequately used in 2025.
Okay, so it's recommended the Finance Committee?
Recommended that we pass this
Amendment, yeah.
amendment to the budget.
Great. I would call on Alder Tucker Long, since that was her amendment, to comment and make the motion to amend if you'd like.
So I brought this amendment up because I received a lot of really positive comments from staff about the picnic that we did for staff appreciation this summer, and but I did also hear from staff who wasn't able to attend that it would be nice to have more than one, because not all of our departments are able to shut down for a couple of hours and send all of their staff to the same event. And so if we have multiple events, then we are able to include more people throughout the year. Also, the anniversary cards and things are something that I've been paying for personally so far, and it's not an insignificant amount of money because we have a lot of staff. So it would be great to have some budget for those kinds of things, as well as just making sure that right now staff appreciation is kind of left up to the department heads, and it would be nice for us as a city council to have sort of a unified way of appreciating staff, to make sure everybody's getting appreciated and knows how much we value them as employees. So I move that we approve the amendment to decrease the contingency line item to $83,451 and add a line item of $3,000 for staff appreciation.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Posey. We're now discussing an amendment to the main budget. Questions or comments on this amendment? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of amending the budget as described in the packet signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes 7-0. Alder Humke, there was a second amendment discussed at Finance Committee as well.
Yeah, there's a second amendment that was discussed around the capital budget. The amendment reads, to eliminate the information technology infrastructure line item, allocating $80,000 of it to the parks to replace the water slide at Byerman's Park, allocating $30,000 to a public art display by Erica Koivunen, and replace the remaining $90,000 into an IT and energy equipment fund. We do not recommend moving forward with this amendment.
Yes, the Finance Committee recommended 3-0 not to include this in the budget. We, of course, it was submitted in advance, so if someone would like to make the motion on the floor, they would be allowed to. I would, I guess, defer to Alder Tucker Long if you'd like to make a statement or a motion.
As all of you probably know, I do care a lot about IT, and I feel very strongly that we need to, improve our IT infrastructure and make sure that we're keeping up with things and being secure with our data and such. However, this $200,000 came as an informal number from the Fitchburg IT department in conjunction with a discussion about them taking over our IT stuff. And as we are not moving forward with having them take over things, this $200,000 doesn't really have a purpose at the moment. I am concerned that since we don't have a specific focus for this money, that either it may not be used this year, in which case it goes back into the budget, or it may not be used in the best possible way because we don't have a plan for it at the moment. I do, however, through the discussions with finance, in the finance meeting, I am interested in potentially making an alternate amendment. Is that something I can do now, or do we have to talk about this one first?
I would leave that to your discretion, obviously, as long as it's related to a similar topic as to what you propose and not something completely different. So.
Sure. No, it's modifying it just a little bit. I had originally included the water slide at Fireman's Park because I was under the mistaken impression that the water slide could not be used until we replaced it. But it turns out that we can still use it for one more year. So it's not as critical to put it into the budget this year. And so instead of making the amendment as it is written in the packet, I would like to move that we eliminate the information technology infrastructure line item, allocating $30,000 to a public art display by Erica Koivunen, and replacing the remaining $170K into an IT and energy equipment fund. The IT and energy equipment fund would allow that money to roll over into future years, which keeps it safe in the budget. It keeps it there long-term, and also allows us to determine whether or not it's spent on whatever IT stuff we need, or if there's any energy updates we need as well to go along with it. So,
So motion by Alder Tucker Long to move $170,000 out of the line item into an IT and energy equipment replacement fund, and $30,000 for an art project to the, I forgot the artist's name.
Erica Koivunen.
Erica Koivunen.
And if I could just say one more thing on that, because I didn't address the art display. In talking with our tourism coordinator, this $30K could be matched by tourism, and so we would end up with $60,000 to put in an art display. That could be a really nice draw to our area and be a really nice addition to just to the things that we're doing around town this year.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second? Seeing no second, I'm going to say the motion fails. We are back to the main motion of the budget. Any other questions, comments on the budget? Alder Humke.
So as chair of the Finance Committee, I just wanted to again recognize the hard work and dedication that this budgeting process takes. There's so many details and moving parts to this process, and Mr. Lamers has done an incredible job in laying out all the pieces to ensure this puzzle all fits together in the end. The work of the department directors can also not go understated, as well as all their supporting staff to create well-thought-out plans for 2025. I have much gratitude in hearing their passion for the work they are doing while laying out their visions and finding creative ways to ensure we maximize our tax dollars. I'd also like to give appreciation to the Finance Committee members, the mayor, and the city administrator for the thoroughness of their review, questions, and care for this process as well. The reality is that a budget is a moral document showing the values and priorities and how we care for the community for which we are entrusted. I encourage everyone listening to look at the details of the budget and how it impacts the safety and sustainability of the people of Verona. Thank you all again for the work to move Verona forward in a financially responsible way.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? I'll just add one thing real quick. I think this is a good budget. Every year it kind of seems like the budget is a little bit of a mini crisis, but I do think this is a budget that we can all be proud of, while also being fiscally responsible to the city of Verona residents. I would remind people that, the city of Verona is not going to referendum this year, and we have no plans to do so in the future. We do not have a vehicle registration fee, otherwise known as a wheel tax. We do not special assess people for things like sidewalks. I don't want to diminish the amount or the burden of property taxes on people, but in my opinion, we're a good deal, and we stack up as good or better than the surrounding communities. We love our neighbors, but I think we do a little bit better here. And I think one of the reasons we're able to do that is because we are cautious in the budget, and we are careful, and we budget for worst case scenarios, And if it turns out we end up having extra money at the end of the year, we just use it to offset debt. I think that prevents us from being backed into a corner where we have to go to a referendum. And I would point out that even if you go to a referendum, there's no guarantee that the public is going to say yes to it. And so I appreciate the work that everyone's done, especially the finance director, Mr. Lamers, in kind of keeping us on track and keeping us cautious and making it so we don't have to make catastrophic cuts or have any service levels fall off. So I'm very happy with this budget. It would be great to get some relief from the state, but I don't think we can count on that. And we're just going to have to deal with the hand we've been dealt. But anyways, I want to say thank you for everyone who's contributed to the process. Any other questions or comments? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of resolution number 24-031 approving the 2025 City of Verona budget as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alder Homke.
Yes, I move to approve resolution number 24-032 approving the levying of property taxes for city purposes.
Motion by Alder Homke. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Alder Posey. Alder Homke.
Yeah, the proposed levy is $17,409,281, and staff respectfully requests approval.
Well, since we have to, if we pass the budget, we have to levy the taxes for it. So, motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Alder Posey.
I have a clarifying question. I believe our committee document showed 16.5 million, and this is showing 17 million. And I'm, Mr. Lamers, maybe
Mr.
you want
Lamers, if
to
you
clarify
could.
so we can make sure we've got the right number. Thank you.
The 16 million that's in your resolution, that is without the TIF.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of resolution number 24-032 approving the levying of property taxes for city purposes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from finance?
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent. We'll move on to 10B, which is Public Safety and Welfare Committee. Alder Hoxt.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve a temporary Class B fermented malt beverage and Class B wine license application from the Verona Area Community Theater, 103 Lincoln Street for December 5th through 8th, and also December 12th to 15th, 2024. D. Baldock Agent. There was a typo in the packet, and the applicant did fill out the application correctly, so those two dates, it should be the 5th to the 8th, the 12th to the 15th, and we discussed that at the committee level.
Motion by Alder Hoxt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Homke.
Thank you. The VACT is requesting a temporary license to sell beer and wine at their shows the weekends of the 5th to the 8th and the 12th to the 15th. They've done this many years. Verona Police did not have any issues, and the staff recommends approval of the license.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on this motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the temporary Class B fermented malt beverage and Class B wine license applications from the Verona Area Community Theater, 103 Lincoln Street, for the dates as described by Alder Hoxt, 2024, with D. Baldock Agent, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alder Hoxt.
Actually, I'm going to approve the approval for a full-service retail outlet for Hop House to operate at the Hometown Holidays tree lighting on December 6, 2024 at 400 West Verona Avenue.
Motion by Kaiser McHenry. Is there a second? Alder Kaiser McHenry. Second by Alder Helmke.
Hop House is requesting a full-service retail outlet to serve alcoholic beverages at the Hometown Holidays tree lighting event. This temporary outlet is allowed under their state-issued retail license. The Department of Alcoholic Beverages will provide the final approval after the city signs off on the outlet. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on the motion? Alder Hoxt.
Since this is my business, I do need to recuse myself from voting and commenting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the full-service retail outlet for the Hop House to operate at the Hometown Holiday Tree Lighting on December 6, 2024 at 400 West Verona Avenue signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that passes 6-0 with Alder Hoax abstaining. Alder Hoax.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 24-1054, amending section 10-1-26 of the City of Verona Code of Ordinances, motor vehicles and traffic.
Motion by Alder Hoax. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Alder Posey. Alder Hoax.
Thank you. At approximately 303 West Verona Avenue, which is the south side of West Verona Avenue, acting on a request from the building owner, staff determined the need to amend section 10-1-26, prohibiting parking during certain time periods. The amendment proposes to limit parking to 15 minutes from 8 a.m. through 8 p.m. 7 days a week in a designated area. If approved, it would assist with loading and unloading goods and short-term parking, as the mixed-use building does not have any area on site to easily allow these types of activities. I'm told by the Verona Police that they will take 4 parking stalls and mark them as 15-minute parking.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on this motion? Alder Honke.
Yeah, so when I attended a listening session for the Rita Street project, somebody specifically actually brought this section up, being problematic in the morning time with, I think this is a situation they're probably referring to, is this unloading and loading. I am concerned with the timing of this, that is 8 a.m. is when school is, there's a lot of traffic for school. And this person had specifically called out that situation that's hard to navigate those spaces with all the traffic and things like that. I'm thinking the line of sight is probably back far enough. I think maybe previously they've been closer to the intersection of Marietta and West Verona Avenue. And I guess I'm just, has the consideration for the, just really busy times when kids are crossing and for school, before and after school.
Chief Justice?
It's my understanding that the stalls that were selected are a little farther to the east, allowing at least one stall in between this restricted parking and the crosswalk to aid in that line of sight.
And so, the traffic isn't an issue, at that time? It just is very, very busy on those, in that corridor, and school starting and leaving and ending. Is that under any consideration of this, or?
The way it is now, parking is allowed there already, so we're just restricting the length of that parking, not prohibiting parking. I do have, some other concerns about the lack of parking in the area, and, designating these stalls to such a short limit of time, but that is the request before us, and I don't see a reason to deny it.
Okay, so if parking is an issue, those spots are going to be, when there's events at at the new park, at the Century School Park, those spots will then, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., be only 15 minutes.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if this was said, but part of this is because of the new development, the Mill District and some of the potential tenants that are going in there. They've made this request to make their business work because of the lack of parking around that building.
And there's no other space for these large vehicles, it's trucks, right? It's like a semi-truck to unload. There can be or could be
Could be
is there-
straight truck vans. It could be up to a semi, I imagine, but yes.
And there's no other location on a different side street for them to do this that wouldn't cause so many, I agree with you that there's a lot of parking issues, and I feel like restricting 4 spots seems like a lot, given we have very limited parking in this area.
Mr. Siebertson, did you want to take a crack at that? I saw your hand up, so.
Yes, that was staff's initial concern as well, was the fact that potentially in the future, if we wanted to create more lanes on West Verona Avenue, the idea being that we might not want to allow parking and loading there during certain times of the day, that that was stated to the petitioner in this case. They understand that things can happen in the future if it's proven that we need to remove those parking spaces. So that was brought up as a concern. It was felt that as of now, especially when the school was there, it was definitely an issue. Now that the school is not there, it hasn't been an issue that's been voiced regularly to staff that we knew about. This was reviewed by the city engineer, as well as Public Works, the Parks Department, and Police and Fire.
Okay, so the Art House 360 hasn't even opened yet, and that park has not been in full use yet. So I guess I'm really concerned that we're making decisions based on 0 data points when we don't have active, like next summer, we're going to, so if this passes, like they're fully aware that in like 6 months from now that we could say we don't want to do this anymore. I just feel like it feels rushed and with not a lot of certainty surrounding actual needs in less than a year from now. So like, has that, when those decisions were being made and this recommendation was being made, was any of that considered? The fact that the park hasn't been used yet and that the Art House 360 is going to need those spaces for their...
It was discussed. I mean, parking in that area in general is tight. The 15-minute loading zone isn't precluding people from using those spaces for other purposes. And to answer your initial question regarding the loading area, it was looked at multiple locations of where else we could put a loading zone to accommodate a semi, and this was the only location.
Can I ask another? I wasn't on council when this was designed, but I'm assuming this was not considered, like we have businesses on the lower part of this building, and did anybody talk about loading zones in that planning commission?
I can't remember if it came up. I don't think it did. I mean, I think to a degree, we didn't know what would go there, so it would have been premature to talk about loading zones because not every business needs one.
Sure. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
And then I guess I have a question, Mr. Severson, as long as you're up here. So these would be slots available to the public, right?
Yes, they're not designated to any user. They would be 15 minutes, so...
Basically, you got to be in and out within 15 minutes?
Right, so certain times of the day, they might be used for delivery trucks coming there to deliver, food or goods to the businesses in that building. Other times, it might be used for food delivery drivers. They're picking up pizza to deliver them. Other times, it could be used for customers coming there to pick up something quick and then be on their way.
Could these be used like by an Amazon delivery truck if they're delivering to someone in the apartments?
Could be used by, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess I understand some of the concerns raised, but I do think that since these slots don't belong to a specific business and we expect the area to be busy, I do think that they'll still get used by the public and allow people to kind of go in and out, and there'll be basically slots that are almost, well, not always, but a good portion of the time they'll be available to people. They won't be available for very long, but that's kind of the trade-off. It's in the same way the Verona Library has a 15-minute pickup stall where basically you're supposed to go in and get your books and then leave, and that parking spot is mainly open. So I'm pretty comfortable having these here, and if it turns out it's problematic, we can always revisit it. I've been to an event or two at the park, and it seemed like there was parking, maybe not on the main drag, but there was stuff off of Church that was still within easy walking distance. So I don't think, at least from my view, that we've kind of run out of parking around there. I still think there's parking to be had. But other questions or comments on the motion? Alder Chuckalong.
This might be a question for Lucas, but how did we come to the 4 parking spot number?
That's what would accommodate a full semi.
So they would need all 4 spots for the semi?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Let's make sure. Alder Humke.
I guess that my only comment would be I'm not in favor of this unless the timing changed to be earlier in the evening. Like if it ended at like 5 p.m. when we would have like the market or an event or something like that, I'd be more in favor of passing it. Obviously, I'm only one vote, but.
Alder Chuckalong.
sorry, going along with the 4 spaces for the semis, are semis really going to be there anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.? Or, because I know like we have semis on, I forget the name of the street that runs between Miller's and Goodwill. Like, there are times when semis can park there and times when they can't. So is there a way to time the semis to a smaller amount of time?
Possibly, and so initially when this proposal was brought, staff was recommending it be only the morning hours, and then after further information was explained by the applicant, is that they would need even 4 stalls in the evening hours too, to support their business. So it's not exclusive to the delivery trucks, or sorry, the semis. Mhm.
Okay.
Alder Hoax.
Thanks. Yeah, as a business owner, I know trying to ask a delivery driver to come at a certain time is not going to work out. So I know we get deliveries almost daily, and they range from 6 a.m. when they let themselves in the building to like 4 p.m. On a Friday, right? So I think having the parking spots, I think we're kind of focusing more on delivery, but like the quick in and out, the 15-minute is nice. Like, you see like Aldi and other spots where people just run in, they get their one thing, they go. I think that if we don't have this, I don't know if this business would ultimately be very successful. I think we're limiting their success if we don't have these spots. So that I understand that a semi needs to drop off, but they're normally pretty quick. I think the 4 spots in the afternoon or the evening, especially on like a Friday, if they're just coming to pick up their food and go, is pretty important there.
Other thoughts from the council? Alder Posey.
Yeah, so in general, I'm in support of trying this. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Having been a parent back when there was a school and winding my way in and out at that 15-minute window when it's potentially rush hour and everything else, the concept of adding a semi to that lane is kind of challenging, but I'm willing to give it a shot. This is in my area. I'd love to see that space filled, and if this is something we have to try to get businesses into these empty spaces, I'm willing to give it a shot, and hopefully the safety side follows along and it ends up being a safe and successful venture.
Alder Humke.
I assume this was for an existing business. Is this for a business that might go into that other space?
Yes.
Okay.
So.
That's helpful because I feel like I had heard about the other business that is currently there. So.
Okay. So this would be to, I wasn't here when the building was approved, but it was my understanding that the hopes were one of the spaces would be used as a restaurant, to not only have another restaurant in the community, but also help with, providing a restaurant right next to the park. It just seemed to be a great use. And so having a restaurant there had been apparently a long-term goal. But as restaurants have looked at the space, the concern that keeps coming up is the loading for delivery trucks. And I know in my experience, usually if you approve a restaurant to go somewhere and they don't have parking, then delivery trucks just double park. And that causes its own issues. So I do think if the idea is to have a restaurant at this location, I think it's probably going to be necessary for anyone to have some loading. I don't know if 4 spaces, but some loading.
That's super helpful context that wasn't included in this, so I think that's really helpful. Thank you for explaining.
Motion before the body. Other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving ordinance number 24-1054, amending section 10-1-26 of the City of Verona Code of Ordinances, Motor Vehicle and Traffic, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alder Hoax.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 24-1055, amending section 10-1-27 of the City of Verona Code of Ordinances, Motor Vehicles and Traffic.
Motion by Alder Host. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Tucker Long. Alder Host.
Thank you. The Public Safety and Welfare Committee asked staff to evaluate the South Franklin Street and Military Ridge State Trail intersection for potential parking restrictions, of which there currently are no restrictions. Staff proposes establishing the same parking restriction as the restriction applied to the intersection of Lincoln Street and the Military Ridge Bike Trail, which prohibits parking within 50 feet of the trail in both directions. If enacted at the intersection of South Franklin Street and the Military Ridge State Trail, the proposed ordinance amendment would open the line of sight for pedestrians and bicyclists crossing the intersection, improve safety, and is consistent with another crossing in the city. Staff recommend approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on this motion? Alder Tucker Long.
Thank you. Yeah, I brought this up to Public Safety because I had received a number of complaints of people who had almost been hit when trying to cross or had seen other people almost get hit when crossing. So I'm really excited that we're moving forward on this, and I hope everyone supports it.
Other questions or comments? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of ordinance number 24-1055, amending section 10-1-27, parking prohibited zones, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion passes. Anything further from Public Safety?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Excellent. We move on to 10C, which is Public Works, Sewer, and Water Committee. Alder Tucker Long.
Thank you. I move that we approve the City of Verona sidewalk and multi-use path policy with one amendment that we made during the council meeting, or during our committee meeting, which is to update section E to read, instead of just the City of Verona, instead of just the council, city council, it's city council and/or Public Works Committee.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Lytle. Alder Tucker Long.
Thank you. This policy is intended to establish guidelines for the installation or replacement of sidewalks and/or multi-use paths in the City of Verona. This policy promotes safety, social, community, connectivity, environmental, and equity considerations throughout the city and will allow the city to meet the transportation needs of current and future users of the network. The long-term objective of the City of Verona is a complete and connected active transportation network. Thus, the goal of the city is to have curb, gutter, and sidewalk/multi-use paths on all existing and future streets as applicable. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on this motion? Alder Posey.
I just want to say I really appreciate having the exceptions laid out in this, because I think there are situations in our city where it's not appropriate to add a sidewalk just because of how things were designed without them. So I will publicly say thank you very much for having that foresight to allow for those exceptions in those situations.
Other questions or comments? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the City of Verona sidewalk and multi-use path policy with the amendment described by Alder Tucker Long, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from Public Works?
Nothing further.
Excellent. With that, we'll move on to item 11, which is new business. First up, we have 11A, which is a discussion and possible action regarding the City of Verona and the Destination Madison Agreement for 2025 to 2027. Mr. Olick.
Thank you, Mayor. The agreement was reviewed by the Tourism Commission and the City Attorney. The Tourism Commission recommended approval of the agreement. At the last Common Council meeting, the Common Council requested that an exhibit containing deliverables be incorporated into the agreement, which has been added to the agreement.
Thank you for that explanation and for tracking that down. Questions, comments, or motions on this item? Alder Posey.
One second. I'd like to make a motion to approve the City of Verona and Destination Madison Agreement for 2025 to 2027.
Motion by Alder Posey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Humke. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Alder Tucker Long.
In our last discussion, we had talked about having a shorter term instead of 3 years. Can we get some feedback on how that discussion went?
Mr. Olick.
I really don't have anything on that one. Alder Tucker Long. Attorney Kleinmeyer, if you'd like to come up.
Yes, so I think that discussion was also in relation to kind of the termination language, and I think there was kind of two things. One was, can we get, deliverables, and obviously that has occurred as part of with the Exhibit A. I mean, it is a 25, 26, 27 3-year agreement. I think a comment the mayor made at the last meeting, which I agree with, is anytime you have termination language in an agreement, when you have to show cause, that becomes very difficult. Typically, we ask for language in an agreement where we have the ability to terminate without cause. So I think, a couple of options you have with respect to this is, in Exhibit A, there definitely are some objective deliverables, a few of them, which obviously, we don't want to anticipate that there's going to be a violation, but we have to at least have that discussion on the front end. There's other deliverables that I would say aren't necessarily objective, they're more subjective, which makes it very difficult to then end the agreement. So one of the things that you could contemplate is just a shorter term. From the idea of, my understanding is this Exhibit A is something new to the relationship. And one school of thought is to make it a 1-year agreement just to see how this plays out. And then obviously, if you're comfortable at a Common Council level with how it's working, you can either do an amendment that allows it to go for another 2 years after that, so you ultimately get to 3. That's one option. The other is to introduce some without cause termination language, since it's a 3-year agreement, but have a, let's say a 6-month notice time period, which that way, because on the flip side, I certainly understand why Destination Madison, they go through the process of planning. They want to make sure that they have the funding available. So if you are going to have some type of without cause termination, you'd probably want it to be, whether 6 months or a year. But I think those are the two ways to potentially deal with a 3-year agreement, especially when the exhibit that really kind of forms the basis, if you are going to take action to end the relationship, is a new document.
And did anyone talk to Destination Madison? Are they amenable to a shorter term other than 3 years in light of this new addition?
I wasn't in contact at all with Destination Madison, but I know Allison was.
So I did bring feedback from the council to Destination Madison and asked for a revision, and if they preferred to draft it and have it then reviewed by our city attorney, and they said that they would do that. So they sent back this version. My understanding is we've had a renewable agreement with them that has not been officially signed by this council. I guess I can't speak to the history of exactly what the terms have been previous to this. However, just the process is so lengthy that having it renewable after a year, when we do have the termination clause within the contract, felt like it would be more efficient and productive for us to have that agreement in place for the 3-year period, rather than going back to review it again in a matter of 7 months or so. But we can certainly go back to them. I think if we did put straight termination language in and said this is the only way we're going to sign the agreement, then they would sign the agreement. So I do think that if that's the recommendation of the council, that's certainly something that they would more than likely accept. But then I think we probably want to provide them with that. If there's a recommendation from the council, specific language that we want, then we should probably review or revise what they've provided and then send that final document back to them, would be my
Alder Tucker Long, was that everything for now? Alder Kaiser McHenry.
I agree with putting in the termination language per our attorney. Looking at Exhibit A, none of these are really measurable, so we don't really have a way of knowing or having a benchmark, in my opinion, of whether they're going to meet their demands or requests of a service contract. Every service contract I've seen has specific deliverables, and if not, has an out if they don't do it. So I would support that out clause rather than shortening the term.
There is a motion before the body.
So, I mean, essentially, correct, and so you effectively can vote on the motion right now if you want to. However, somebody could make a proposed amendment to the agreement. And again, I'm just trying to give you background. I think if you approve the agreement as it's written, hopefully everything works out. But I will tell you that I think it would be very difficult for you to terminate the agreement, and it's a 3-year agreement. So one way to potentially amend the agreement is to add language into probably subsection 4, because that's renewal and termination, that would, allow the city to terminate the agreement without cause. And then the question is how much notice that you want to give. I mean, I would definitely say at least 6 months. It would be even, you even could do a year. But at least I would say, 6 to 9 months. I mean, then you still have a 3-year agreement with them, but at least you have some ability to get out if you hit a situation where, and municipalities definitely run in this. I'm not just talking about Verona. Boy, we have this agreement and we'd like to get out of it, but it's going to be really difficult to terminate this if we demonstrate cause. And so then you stick with it. And I do agree that while I think it's very helpful to have Exhibit B, and it certainly improves the document, it doesn't necessarily assist the city as it relates to the termination issue.
I guess then other comments or potential amendments? Alder Tucker Long.
I move that we amend the agreement, in the renewal or termination, sorry. Okay, question first, actually. So Attorney Kleinmeyer, you said in Section 4, renewal and termination is where we would need to amend it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that you need to specify within the agreement where you want the amendment. I mean, if you want an amendment that's going to allow the city to terminate the agreement without cause based on whatever notice period you identify in the motion, I think you just need to give staff that direction, and we would just, when you look at this document, I can see 2 or 3 spots right out of the gate where we could put it, and I think that's more of working with Destination Madison as to where it would go.
Okay. In that case, I would move that we adjust the agreement to allow us to terminate the agreement without cause with 60 days' notice, and also to update it that it's not automatically renewed.
Sorry, before I ask for a second, Mr. Kleinmeyer, is 60 days reasonable?
I would suggest 6 months from the standpoint of, again, this is also an entity that you're working with, and they're going to spend money and they have to do some planning. And so I think 60 days might be a little short from them.
Okay.
6 months effectively allows you to address the fact that it's a 3-year agreement, and therefore, if you find that you have a problem, then you would still have the ability to terminate without cause, but they have a sufficient time period to adjust how they're going to approach things.
Yeah, I'm happy with that number. I just picked 60 days because that was the current notice of non-renewal. So I'm happy to amend my motion to...
So my understanding is the motion right now is move to amend the agreement to remove the automatic renewal language, and then also to add language that would allow the city to terminate the agreement without cause with 6 months' notice to Destination Madison.
Correct.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Kaiser McHenry. Amendment on the motion before the body. Questions or comments on this amendment? Alder Lytle.
I appreciate being specific with this, but kind of taking the temperature of the council would, or maybe, let me rephrase that, question for Attorney Kleinmeyer. would that typically allow Destination Madison the same option to terminate without cause? Is that usually a two-way street? If we ask for it, they're going to ask for it back, and we should just assume that that would be acceptable to the city as well, or?
I would say that it's not always the case in service agreements that the party providing the service seeks to have termination without cause. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's automatic. And so I think it's really up to you as to whether or not, and I think at that point then you'd essentially have to vote on the existing motion in the second and then potentially have another motion if you wanted to allow that, or alternatively allow staff just to negotiate with them. And if it turns out that they want that, then that agreement would come back to you at your probably your December meeting. I know that's a lot of time to spend on a services agreement, but it's also a 3-year agreement. So I think the discussion that you're having is, if this is a 1-year agreement, I don't think that we would be having this discussion. But 3 years makes it so it's necessary, I think.
Yeah, so I'll just, to summarize my comment, I'm fine with the amendment as proposed. I don't think we need to add other changes, just kind of the possibility that when it comes back at our next meeting, they may have requested something similar in terms of termination without cause.
We're still discussing the amendment. Any questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of amending the main motion as described by Alder Tucker Long signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
And the motion is amended. We are now back on the main motion. Questions or comments on the main motion?
So just to clarify then, it's approve the agreement with the amendment, the 2 amendments that you just approved.
Correct. Yep, good. Seeing nodding heads. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the City of Verona and Destination Madison Agreement 2025 through 2027 as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. I will move on to 11B, which is a discussion and possible action regarding the pre-annexation review agreement between the City of Verona and the Glenn W. Fisher Survivors Trust. Mr. Aulick.
Thank you, Mayor. The Glenn W. Fisher Survivors Trust is contemplating development of property they own located in the town of Verona, but immediately adjacent to the city. As part of the development, Glenn W. Fisher Survivor Trust anticipates submitting an annexation petition to the city. The process of reviewing the anticipated annexation petition and all plans and documents associated with the development, and the process of preparing, filing, and monitoring the USA Urban Service Area application will cause the city to incur significant direct and indirect expenses, including but not limited to staff time and fees and expenses incurred by the city for outside consultant services related to review. For example, engineers, attorneys, accountants, planners, and other professionals. The city recovers the fees at cost. City staff recommend approval of the agreement.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, or motions on this item? Alder Humke.
I move to approve the pre-annexation review agreement between the City of Verona and Glenn W. Fisher Survivors Trust.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Alder Posey had it. Seconded by Alder Posey. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the pre-annexation review agreement between the City of Verona and the Glenn W. Fisher Survivors Trust signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. We'll move on to 11C. Which is discussion and possible action regarding the terms and conditions of shared parking agreements for the potential event center as part of Sugar Creek Commons project on the West Verona Avenue. We have been going for a little bit. I'm going to take an 8-minute recess so people can get water and go to the bathroom if they need to. So we will reconvene back here at 8:42 p.m. Don't keep posing. Now it's torment, and even. Oh, jeez. I hate you. All right, it is 8:42 PM, and we are back in session regarding 11C. Mr. Kleinmeyer, or Mr. Severson.
Yes, I will give a introduction, and then Mr. Kleinmeyer can go into some of the details of the language of the proposed parking agreements. So just to give you some history, hopefully a brief history on the project. For those of you that were around in 2019, maybe on the Plan Commission or the council, this site was approved for a hotel and conference center at that time. Obviously, lots of things have changed since then, especially the market, as we've heard earlier tonight from the hotel operator. Things have changed. And so the applicant, among other reasons, have revised their proposal for this site to include multifamily housing at grade, and then in the front of the building to have a smaller event center. So I believe it was originally proposed at 450, and now it's a 200-person event center. They went before the Plan Commission last December for an initial review, again earlier this year in July, and then September came in for their formal proposal for preliminary and final plan development approval. I think in the reviews that have gone before the Plan Commission and the Common Council, there's been general support of this mix of land use. Definitely support for the event center itself. We've heard from multiple people that this is the added benefit to the community. The question that always comes up is, how is the parking going to work? And our current ordinance standards, they're significantly deficient in the parking, and as a result, staff asked the applicant to look into having an independent third party take a look at their parking and see where shared parking might be an option. That analysis also showed that they did have a significant parking deficiency at certain times, mainly during weekdays. If there was a convention at the site, that was roughly 120 parking spaces. But then also on the weekends, on a Saturday for a wedding, there was a deficiency of order of magnitude around 50 parking spaces. So the question then is, how does this parking accommodated? And so the applicant was proposing to have some shared parking agreements with some of the surrounding properties. And as part of that, our ordinance does allow for shared parking agreements, a facility. Typically, that is to allow two properties that are adjoining each other to share parking, benefits both sides. In this case, it's a little bit different because the properties are not immediately adjacent. One's across the street to the east, and then there's the hotels to the west. Our ordinance also allows it in the case where these uses are within 500 feet. The particular sites that were selected are beyond that 500 feet, and so that would be an exception. So what it's really coming down to is the details of the agreements. I think it can be argued that there's sufficient parking in these three sites to accommodate overflow. The question is, are they going to be available, and how long are they going to be available for? And to that, I'll let Mr. Kleinmeyer go into that detail.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any dispute among anybody that the site is deficient for parking. And the other thing that I would say is, I mean, my understanding is it is part of a PUD district. A little bit of flexibility is allowed with that, which I think Lucas has already touched on, because there's a couple of sections in our code that staff, because it may seem like staff is coming on hard right now, but staff is, the 500 feet, essentially, we're disregarding that. There's other language that says there has to be cross easements to allow for the parking. Staff is looking past that. So I think staff is really trying to find a way to make this work. And And we've had some shared parking agreements drafts that we've seen, and we're not asking you to approve any shared parking agreements, but there's two key areas, I think, or two or three that we need to talk about. One that I think we can get around, and one is, by our code, the shared parking agreements are supposed to be recorded on the property, which makes sense because if somebody sells the property, you want to make sure that you're subject to it. We've been hearing that there are various reasons it may be, and I think a member of the church spoke and said that they have some limitations, and I'm not sure for the hotel, but it may be because this is a national chain and they don't want it recorded. At a staff level, we think we can get past that. The city would need, to do that, the city would need to become a party to the shared parking agreement strictly for the ability to enforce them. Because if they're not going to be recorded, we at least have the ability to enforce them. And so I think that we can get past that. I do have a little bit of a concern with respect to, future potential owners of the property. But to me, that kind of dovetails into the other issue. The event center needs parking. And so the term of the agreement should be effectively 99 years, or as long as the event center is operating, whichever is shorter, and then allowing for a renew of 99 years, because if you don't have the shared parking agreements, the event center can't open, which necessarily means you have to have the shared parking agreements for it to continue to operate. And we've been approached, and I think the applicant is doing, it's doing what it can. I mean, initially, we had some agreements that were 5 years. We've been approached now about the potential to move it to 10 years in those shared parking agreements. As I've read those agreements, there's termination language, though, that would allow, kind of going back to our Destination Madison conversation, the property owner to terminate without cause the agreement for 6 months' notice, which I can totally understand why the property owner wants to have that flexibility. What we're trying to avoid at a staff level, though, is, okay, we approve this, and whether it's 5 years or 10 years, there's agreements in place, they have termination language, or they don't have termination language, but what happens if you're on the council 10 years from now, and all of a sudden, there's no more agreement, or somebody terminates it, or you're on the council, or somebody else is on the council? Are you really going to sit here and say, okay, event center, you get shut down? Because now we no longer have shared parking, or we definitely don't have the amount that we need. And if you do move forward with these agreements, and they are shorter than, if they're 10 years, we're absolutely going to have a separate agreement with the event owner that's going to be belt and suspenders times 7, saying you agree that if the shared parking is changed in any way, shape, or form, you shut down. And they're going to sign that agreement, because they said they will. But they're also going to be in this council room with a bunch of people if all of a sudden they lose the shared parking and they want the event center to continue. And if all of a sudden you have a wedding that is scheduled and this common council is saying, look, you don't have parking, all right? So this was approved as part of a conditional use permit that you had to have the shared parking agreements in place. The shared parking agreement, one or multiple ones are no longer in place, therefore you're not in compliance with your conditional use permit. Then the council at that point in time is going to have the ability to say, we're shutting down the event center. I mean, that's the situation that you're potentially going to be in if you allow this to go ahead with 10-year agreements. Now, maybe you're okay with that. And if you are, you get to make these decisions. But we need your feedback on these two issues in particular, the recording, which I think we can get around, but the term of the agreement and the termination language in the shared parking agreements, because it's not going to do the applicant any good to go through all this work and then come back to you. And if the council's position is, look, we can't have, we appreciate the fact that you've put forth the effort to get these 10-year agreements, but we want this event center to operate for a long period of time, and so the shared parking agreements effectively need to be in place for as long as the event center is operating. That would be a perfectly reasonable position for the council to take, but I think everybody wants to, we kind of, at a staff level, and we would also like to be able to talk to the applicant, what is the feeling of the council on this issue, because that's going to dictate kind of the conversations that we have with them moving forward. But again, to be clear, we're not asking you to approve any agreements tonight. We're just looking for your feedback on possible terms and conditions.
Thoughts from the council? I'll call on myself real quick. The first one seems like, yeah, that's not a problem. The second thing, I'm okay with that. I do think it needs to be made very clear to the operator, which, you said belt and suspenders times 7, so I assume you're on the same path there. But it needs to be clear that the city will shut the event center down, and that it doesn't matter if there's a wedding reception, quinceañera, retirement party, whatever. It's if you don't meet the conditions of the conditional use permit, you can't operate. It's the same way as if there was like a fence requirement, some other requirement, and they didn't have it anymore. They would probably get a legal letter from Mr. Kleinmeyer, and if they didn't meet it, we would shut them down. This is a little bit more dramatic because obviously it would be a wedding or something else, and I understand we could be putting this on a future council and a future mayor and future staff saying, you have to be the bad guys and shut someone's wedding down. But, I mean, to me, that's the only way it's going to operate. And I do think, I really like the idea of shared parking because it's a more efficient use of space. If you have parking spots that aren't pretty much continuously, occupied, it's not the highest and best use. So this would basically allow them to be continually used. I think it's a good opportunity, but everyone has to be comfortable with setting up the city to be the bad guy. So that's the way I see it. I'm okay with it because I think it's going to work out. And if it came down to it, I wouldn't have a problem being the bad guy on this. But other feedback, other Humke.
Yes, I know at one point previously they talked about busing, like being able to move people into the center. Is that something that like if there was an issue in the future, that if there was like how is that a workaround for them? I'm just like, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, and so I just want to see if there's like other options available to them. If it's not an ideal situation to have to bus everybody into a center if they lose parking. So I don't know if that's.
I don't know if I can answer that question. I mean, certainly there's event centers that bus people in, but they also have a lot more buses, and it's a closer location. It would just kind of depend on what location they were able to negotiate with to have the people park there, and if they could guarantee the transportation.
Okay, thank you. I think I align with the mayor. I like the idea of the shared parking to not have empty spaces. We have a city that doesn't have a lot of capacity in terms of parking, and I think that that's okay to have more things come into our city like this, the event center. I like the idea of the event center. I like the revenue that would generate for our businesses, our community. So appreciate you coming.
Other feedback from the council? Alder Lytle.
Question for staff specifically, Mr. Sievertson. What Attorney Kleinmeyer brought up in terms of this is a PUD with additional flexibility, just from a magnitude standpoint and from a number of exception standpoint. I'd like to hear your honest opinion of, how much, if we would move forward with this, how much more difficult would it make your job in terms of trying to hold new developments to standards when it comes to parking and shared parking agreements and that kind of thing? Obviously, you're not offering a legal opinion, but just, on the scale of, a minor annoyance to, what do we even have these on the books for, where do you land?
Well, it would certainly water down our regulations. So, I mean, the regulations that we have in our zoning ordinance are pretty typical from what I've seen from other communities, making sure that the parking, there's either some firm agreement. I did reach out to some of the surrounding communities to see what parking agreements they had. In their experience, either the parking agreement is proximate to each other, and so it's parking that is benefiting both people. They might have uses that are have opposite demand. And so in those cases, I think that's why these regulations were set up to allow for that. That's kind of a no-brainer when both sides benefit from it and are fully willing to sign a long-term agreement or a perpetual easement. I do get really, I'm concerned about how this will work in the future, not only for this board, but potentially future councils. It's not something I'm comfortable with. I would like to see a much longer term. Definitely see assurances from the operator, making sure that they, understand the ramifications Just in my experience, most businesses that are putting that much investment in a business want to see at least a 10 to 20-year lease. That's dependent upon how much investment they're putting into it. So from that standpoint, I would like to see it at least 20 years, or to have some assurances that from the operator that they're fully willing to enter into this agreement, understanding the consequences. I'm worried for what the council may have to deal with in the future, but I'm also concerned about the operator.
Mr. Clymer, do you have something to add?
I was just wanted to piggyback off that. I mean, I totally understand, and again, I give credit to FTG with what they're doing. They heard that we wanted to be longer. They're trying to work on it to be longer, and I certainly give credit to the other property owners who are willing to move forward, at least with a 5 or 10-year agreement. It gives me great pause that somebody would come in, though, and essentially invest what the city is looking to see done here as an event center when there's no guarantee that they would be operating within 5 years from now. And that, to me, is more of the thing that gives me pause of people showing in here. And I totally understand what the mayor is saying. If you say we're willing to do this and we know that we might have to be the bad guy as part of this process, then you're making a knowledgeable decision. But it's the event operator, like, why would you be willing to do that when there's no guarantee that if you make this investment that you're even going to be operating 5 years from now?
And then, thank you for that clarification as well, but also I'll ask your opinion as staff and the potential the city is opening itself up to by giving this much leeway, or potentially giving this much leeway, when other developers come forward. Is this enough of a one-off kind of process that you don't necessarily see red flags there for future proposals?
I think that we would have some flexibility as it relates to that. I mean, the city has made no bones about the fact that it's looking to try to get an event center use. I mean, this is going back even to some discussions on other properties. So I think the only place that you're really limiting yourself is if some other event operator comes in. Then we're definitely going to have our hands tied. Not necessarily for other uses, although that doesn't mean the argument's not going to be made. It's just this, I think that this is a very unique use, though. And I think it is something, you all have talked about this before, how you believe it could benefit downtown Verona. You couple those two things together, and hopefully that will give us a little bit of leeway. I think my bigger concern, though, is just also we're not applying our ordinances. And so that can be used against you in not just on this unique parking issue, but potentially on other parking-related issues. But again, I do believe the event center is pretty unique to Verona, so that would be helpful to us.
I'll just quick offer my opinion and then yield the floor. Thinking back to years on Plan Commission and trying to be consistent with the feedback we gave staff and applicants, I see how the event center and the multifamily has changed over time, but I don't see much in the way of downsizing the number of units proposed to try to at least get us a little closer to closing the gap here. And so in my ideal world, rather than putting the applicant at risk for not being able to comply with their CUP and financing implications of that, they would also be looking at a scaled-down option on the housing side as another way to potentially get us closer to where we need to be.
Other feedback from the council? Alder Hoxt.
I've got just a couple of questions. I'll try to be brief. So back to, I guess, kind of questions like Alder Helmke had. So would this propose, would we put signs up? Like what, all those apartment owners, renters, if they don't have underground, are they going to get kicked out? Ultimately, people are going to park as close as they want until you make them park farther away, right? I mean, they're going to park in those parking lots, right? So now do I don't know if they have parking permits that they use or what? I don't want to all of a sudden allow this and then have all the renters not be able to park there, right? Or be upset. Or Bogey Factory doesn't have any clientele because they can't park there. Or the people across the street on West Verona Avenue, right? So that, or I guess some of my questions, I mean, I was in a shared parking agreement with a neighbor, and it was, I mean, it was a business, but it went south real quick, and it was terrible. And we've moved on, but that was an easy one, right? But we had to have that in place for us to even open, and yeah, it was not a good outcome, but that was, like, we had an ironclad, like, it was very clear, right? So I would, for sure, I mean, I think it needs to be spelled out, and for me, it's just, we can't allow it and hope it goes well and then deal with it 10 years down the road, and then it just, that doesn't seem like it's very fair or wise for a council to do. And I think philosophically, like, when the changes were made to that site, like, that ship has sailed. Like, then, it was supposed to be a very large hotel, right? A hotel and a convention center, and then all of a sudden they kind of switched gears and did apartments, right? Like that, you can't come back now and all of a sudden want different restrictions and you're 240 some spots short, right? I mean, I feel like there could be other spots, not that I'm very pro-business, but I would, you know, there could be other spots in Verona that this works better at, that we don't need to jam it in here just because they have a handshake deal with Charlie or with a church, whatever. You know, because I also feel like if the hotel's not willing to sign it, what happens if all of a sudden they start losing business because they, you know, they have so much parking from this convention center that people don't want to, they get bad reviews, they whatever, and he just gets out of it. Now we don't have that parking lot, right? So it's got to be signed, it's got to be a lengthy deal.
To be clear, everyone's willing to sign an agreement, is my understanding. It's just
Length of the term.
It's the length and then the termination
Because
language.
we're not going to build this multi-million-dollar facility and then 5 years down the road, shut them down, and then it just goes away. That's not going to happen. Like, we all know that. So, yeah, I think the term certainly needs to be significantly longer than that. Thank you.
Other feedback? Alder Posey.
I mean, I'm kind of repeating what I've said in the past, because I have a level of frustration with this particular property that we seem to be the ones being asked to make a lot of concessions without adjustments to the plan. Like, are we changing the maintenance building? Are we changing, are you changing the maintenance building? Are you changing the number of residences to allow for better parking? Because my concern isn't just the event center. My concern is you have residents there who may be without parking, and then they're going to be the ones looking for parking, and then they're going to end up parked in the church overnight. Or they're just going to do what we all know they're going to do, which is park in St. Vinny's and get their car towed. Or St. Vinny's is going to be forced to put up signage that makes them really seem unfriendly. And that's like, it just seems like we're being asked to allow these extra things because it's an event center. And I love the event center concept, but why is it all on us to make this thing work? And so I am all for, if we're doing shared parking, let's have it be for the longest term possible, 99 years. I know there's been property agreements for generations of facilities for like government land for 99 years, things like that. I mean, eventually that comes to an end too. You know, and I know there's potential for busing, potential for all kinds of options, but really, again, it just comes back to why are we the ones stuck here trying to figure this out? So, because people are going to park where they're going to park, no matter what agreements you have signed. So if you could figure out the parking correctly for the development that you have, that's, I think, what I would expect for the residents who are going to be living there and the business owners who are there, not just the event center.
Other feedback from the council? Mr. Sievertson, do you feel like you have guidance? It felt a little...
Yeah, I think just to clarify, there was a question about residents and where residents would park. It was staff's recommendation that they just guarantee that at least every resident has at least one underground parking space included in their lease. So that wasn't like an option to get an underground parking space. And those spaces would be reserved for residents, so those wouldn't be used for the event center. However, to your point, if the lot is full, where do, if there's 2, 3 people living in an apartment, where do they park? And as it was explained, that they would have the right to park in those spaces, although none of those operators were allowing overnight parking. So they would have to then move to the other site and then, I guess, move their car back. Sorry, to answer your initial question, was there other, or just address staff's comments? I think if there's any ideas from the council or preference in terms of like a term, if it's 10, 20, 99-year lease, if there's any preferences, I think that would be helpful.
I think it was definitely as long as possible. I guess I would ask the council, does anyone have any red lines? Like, is someone like hearing this plan is like, I'll never vote for this? Or is like, I would only vote for it if it was here? Like, I think that would be helpful to city staff and to the applicant. Mr. Conrad?
And I think the other thing that's going to be relevant too is, I mean, we can have a 99-year lease, but let's say, but if there's termination language in there that allows the property owner to terminate without cause with 6 months' notice, then that really doesn't do this. I mean, we're still in the same spot as if it's a 5-year lease then. So, and again, I appreciate why the property owners may be taking the position. I mean, they're binding their, even if it's not recorded, they're binding their land, but that doesn't necessarily satisfy what you all need, and because you really need the parking for the event center, essentially.
Alder Humke.
Yeah, I would say for me, like the 6-month termination clause feels like a no-go because it could start and then it could be a disaster. I'm not saying it's going to be, and then it could be a 6 month, and then we're like not even a year in, and all of a sudden have no parking. So I just feel like we have to have some level of assurance for at least, I mean, 10 years would be ideal. Obviously, 99 would be so much better, but the 6-month clause, I understand it and I respect it. I just don't know that it really works in this situation.
Other thoughts or red lines? Alder Tucker-Law.
I agree with Alder Humke on the termination clause. Like 6 months notice for terminating parking for an event center that's not enough notice, first of all, but second of all, like if they can terminate without cause, then I feel we don't have an agreement, because it could just disappear at any time, and I'm really uncomfortable with that. And yeah, I would say probably my hard line is probably at least 25 years, because event centers take a while to get up and running. It's going to take a while, but also too, people book things years out, and I think it's just not fair to try to expect the community to get on board with this if it could potentially disappear at any moment either. So we just need to be able to provide that stability going forward. And as much as I wish parking wasn't so critical, we don't have any other infrastructure at the moment to support getting people there. And so realistically, cars are super important to anyone who's going to be running events there. And so we need to have a solid parking solution.
Other feedback or red lines from the council? Alder Posey.
So I think for me, having said what I've already said, there needs to be some way, and whether it's 99 years, whatever it might be, let me go all the way back. Like, I remember sitting here when we were first talking about this as a hotel and convention event center, and somebody sitting at that table talking about Craig's Cakes walking over and how great this event center was going to be and why we should approve it. And so to be sitting here now, all these years later, having this conversation is so incredibly frustrating. Because if you're going to develop an event center, it needs to have event center parking. And that's what was in that first conversation, and yes, it's adjusted from a hotel to being a residential property, but there still should be parking. Like, this is a really simple, straightforward problem. So if you can figure out a way to guarantee parking for the life that that facility operates as an event center, which is what was first in these conversations, and now through changes, it's all gotten adjusted, and I get it, the market has changed. I sit on the tourism with Charlie. I hear this regularly, and I know that things need to adjust, and I'm comfortable with that, but there needs to be guaranteed parking for those residents and for the event center. So however you need to do that, that's what it needs to be for me. And I'm only one person up here, so, but yes, I speak strongly because I've been here through all those conversations.
Other feedback or red lines from the council? Alder Kaiser McHenry.
I agree with Alder Posey. Having worked at an event center, if you don't have parking, it's a deal breaker. I mean, I want the development, don't get me wrong, and I'm a business owner and I want it, but I don't even have enough parking at my business. You know, there's just not enough parking in downtown Verona. And then add 250 more. I just think we need to revisit how to add some parking. Underground, above ground, whatever it is, add another layer. I mean, there's lots of creative ways to come up with parking. Put in a monorail, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of options, seriously. I mean, we can look at other areas to do this. And if this is the place we want it, I think we need to guarantee that there's enough parking for everything, and there isn't now. And I feel bad to say that, but because I want it. But I want it to be successful, and it won't be successful if we don't have parking. Just my opinion.
Other feedback or red lines from the council? Any outstanding questions from staff? Or
No, that was very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Unless anyone has any last-minute things, we'll move on to our final item, which is 11D, and I think we can handle this mostly in open session, is a discussion and possible action regarding the development agreement, the public improvements agreement, tax incremental district number 11, between the City of Verona and Epic Systems Corporation. Mr. Kleinmeyer.
Sure. So, and yes, obviously, we haven't noticed that if you want to convene in closed session, we have the ability to do that. I think at a staff level, we're prepared to move forward in open session. What I can tell you is we did meet as a council at a previous meeting. We did convene into closed session to get feedback from the council on a prior draft. Jamie and I then took the feedback that we received from the council and the mayor, and we redlined the agreement according to what you wanted to see. And then, you know, we shared that with Epic, had some discussions, and, you know, I think that Epic was maybe not expecting them, but certainly by some of the other even prior discussions that we had, knew that some of the stuff that we were going to be saying was going to be coming, and so they got it, talked internally, and agreed to our changes. So essentially, everything that the council had requested as part of the previous discussion is included in what is the clean draft of your agreement here. Again, I say this all the time as it relates to TIF districts. Just because you create a TIF district doesn't mean that you are obligated to pursue and negotiate and execute an agreement related to it. That being said, we do have agreement before you today that city staff supports, and I think that we can say that it's entirely consistent with the language that was in the project plan that you approved. And so certainly here to answer any questions. If we start to dive into too many details, I'll raise my hand and suggest that we should go into closed session. But again, consistent with the changes that you had requested before and consistent with the project plan.
Questions, comments, or motions on this item? Alder Tucker-Long.
I move that we approve the development agreement, public improvements agreement, tax incremental district number 11, between the City of Verona and Epic Systems Corporation.
Motion by Alder Tucker-Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Posey. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Alder Posey.
I'll just comment that I appreciate the work everyone put on this, and especially that you guys were willing to discuss that and be willing to make some changes for us and the concerns here. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussions, all those in favor of development agreement, public improvements agreement, tax incremental district number 11 between the City of Verona and Epic Systems Corporation, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. We'll move on to item 12, which is adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alder Hoax. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, I think, by Alder Posey. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we are adjourned at 9:17 p.m. Thank you, everyone.